Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Part of me wishes that on Shabbat I could avoid talking about things in the world that are troubling and difficult. Shabbat should be a day of rest. But Shabbat is not a day of escape. On Shabbat we have to reflect even on the disturbing things that are going on in this world. And it is important to me that we reflect honestly and appropriately in ways that can hopefully be helpful. So I'm just going to quickly tell you about a boy that I went to religious school with. So when I was in religious school, I absolutely remember him in the 7th grade. He was really brilliant, but he didn't always have common sense. And he would come into class in late spring when it was hot and the air conditioning wasn't working, and he would wear a winter coat. And my mother said about him, he's absolutely brilliant. It's a shame that he doesn't have seichel. And seichel is a Hebrew word which became part of Yiddish speech, which means common sense. So this morning, I want to take a look at what is going on, in particular, on many university campuses across the country. And I want to look at it from the perspective of seichel, common sense, and derech eretz, which is common decency. Both of those are sorely lacking on many of our university campuses, where students and the many non-students who are supporting them are saying things that lack common sense and lack common decency. And it's not surprising because a number of the professors that they are learning with and from are teaching narratives that lack common sense and common decency. Narratives that make generalizations about Israel that fit a larger paradigm that simply don't hold up, that are simplistic in ways that are intellectually sloppy, and that also lead to absolute indecency, like rejoicing in barbarity and calling that resistance. This should not be so difficult to be able to call out that which is barbaric. And especially for younger people, I think there is an opportunity to oppose Hamas, to oppose what they did, to oppose what they continue to do, and to actually be consistent with their aspirations for equality for all human beings. Anyone who supports equality for women, as I do, should oppose Hamas. Anyone who supports racial equality should oppose Hamas. Anyone who supports LGBTQ equality, and I support equality regardless of race and regardless of sexuality and gender. Anyone who is opposed to these things should be opposing Hamas. It should be easy. And why is it so difficult? Why are many intelligent college students and their supporters actually opposing freedom when they think that they are supporting it? Truly, it is tragic that so many innocent Palestinians, especially children, have died and suffered through this conflict. They have died and suffered as a result of Hamas's actions. The death and the suffering will stop as soon as Hamas releases hostages and surrenders completely. Again, none of that should be so complicated, and yet it seems like it's very complicated. So there is a lack of common sense, and there is a lack of common decency, and you put those two together, and you have a situation which is incredibly unfortunate. I want to just underscore how important it is for us to be supportive of our college students on campuses across the country. They are very smart, they are very capable, they are very proud. God bless them for what they're doing. They can't do it alone. They are arranging meetings with their university presidents. They are calling the ADL and reporting what their professors are saying and doing and what's taking place on their campuses. They are fighting back as well as they can, and we need to be supportive of them. And even more so, we need to actually call to tasks university professors who are teaching things that are violations of common sense. We need to expose much of what is being taught for what it actually is, which is a thin veneer for anti-Israel, anti-Semitic rhetoric and actions. Now, we need to call out the lack of common sense and the lack of common decency, but I am a hopeful person, and I also try to keep a larger perspective, and I also want to say that we need to be mindful that there is a good deal of common decency and there is a good deal of common sense. Recent polls that came out suggest that most Americans actually are supportive of Israel through this conflict. It is amazing to think that there are those who would support Hamas over Israel, but 90% of Americans 55 and older support Israel. Troublingly, the younger you go, the lower that percentage is, which means that we need to do a good job in terms of the education of an emerging generation. But we need to be mindful that what is going on some university campuses is not thankfully representative of the way that most Americans are thinking. I have to share with you one thing that I heard recently. Somebody at my alma mater, I graduated Columbia in the 80s. We have another alum here, many more, I'm sure. So one of the students who was appropriately taken off campus after he violated campus norms, and I do believe that students who are violating campus norms need to be responded to appropriately and have appropriate consequences. So he said the following. He said, you know, you asked us to read Edward Said. Don't you expect us to use it? So Edward Said taught at Columbia for many years, professor of English and comparative literature, born in Jerusalem, Palestinian. And his main thesis was that the West was oppressing, patronizing, colonizing the East, and that Israel stood out as the model of such colonial oppression. Edward Said, and he actually encouraged people to criticize Israel openly as a result. So you ask us to read him, don't you expect us to use him? To this student, I want to say the following. I went to that university. I was asked to read a whole bunch of things. And I was expected to actually read them and to calibrate them carefully using my own sensibility as I emerged as a young and then middle-aged and older human being in the world. So I managed to do a decent job of that. I read the Peloponnesian Wars. I didn't set my dorm room up as a Spartan training center. I read Oedipus Rex. I managed to have a healthy relationship with my mother for the rest of my life. I read the Communist Manifesto. I didn't join a communist revolution. I read Mein Kampf. You get the idea. The next generation has to be given the guidance to internalize what they are reading in ways that are healthy, that have basic common sense, and that conform to basic decency. Now, our tradition is an amazing tradition, and the more I learn about Jewish tradition, the more I am proud to be a Jew. There is a concept in Jewish tradition known as Naval Birshut HaTorah. What does that mean? It means that you can follow the rules and still be a jerk. The rabbis understood that you can justify, oh, it says here, it says there. Boy, am I smart. And you can behave in ways that are absolutely terrible. There is a tradition of justifying the behavior of King David, who did something he should not have done, and the Bible is clear that he should not have done it. And one rabbi in the 18th century said, look, despite all these justifications, miguneh hadavar, it was still a bad thing. We can never set aside our common sense lens and our common decency lens. And it's not just about Israel, because what's happening in and around Israel is going to impact the entire world. It's about all adults, all women, all children, all human beings who deserve to live and to love and to worship in the ways that they want to. It's not just about what happens to Jews. What's happening to Jews will happen to everyone if all decent and sensible human beings don't stand up and respond. So here is to seichel, common sense, and here is to derech eretz, common decency. And let us all commit to doing whatever we can to make sure that they become even more common. Shabbat shalom.